Andreas is up first. Andreas.
Okay, let me just start the timer before you start talking. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. I'm even more happy that you guys are here because otherwise the room would be empty. So anyway, I was going to talk about, I've been doing this a couple years in a row, and I always called it the fiber reality check. My timer is running, so let me get started here. So state-of-the-art fiber access technologies, that was the name of the track, and I am checking the state-of-the-art. I was down in Southern California. That kind of reminded me of this movie, I Feel the Need for Speed. So I think that is very applicable here with the technology horizon 10, 25, 50, 100, and whatever else may be in the works for the future. So we'll hear more from my colleagues. And it's really, if you feel the need for speed, just pick one of the state-of-the-art technologies. And state-of-the-art is not only a technical thing, but it is also an economical thing, where you pick the right stuff at the right time that actually allows you to basically realize your business cases. Now, one thing is clear: you never want a customer to wait. And it's a pretty simplistic slide, but it kind of gives me some idea about what that actually means. So we've got people that have broadband, be it 100 or 200 megabit. And I think there are people that say, oh, you really don't need more than 100 megabit. It does what you need to do in the house. And that is true. I mean, you can do with 100 megabit a lot of things. But in that example here with the release of Gran Turismo 7 that you download to your SSD, it's a difference of 4 hours, 22 minutes, all the way down to, if the internet delivers it from the server farm, to under 2 minutes, right? So there's a large, disparity of things, how your internet experience actually varies based on what the speed is that you have. Now there's other factors that come into with the Wi-Fi, etc., but nobody wants to wait. And instant gratification, this is for me the key property of living in the United States. It's like we live in a society that wants instant gratification. So let's make faster broadband for faster gratification. So I kind of looked at this, and so there is in the lower part, there are like all these services. And when I kind of dial back like 5 years, we were talking about, oh my God, there will be 4K UHD video, and it's just going to suck out all our bandwidth. And then there's 8K video and all these things. So everything was kind of like streaming is going to kill us. Unicast, transition, and streaming, that's all going to be bad. But I think we're kind of like at the verge to kind of see the next change, right? Instant gratification along with enterprise applications, cloud, interaction, immersive VR, these type of services going forward will basically drive not so much things that we feared before as average bandwidth, but actually peaking in order to basically have a experience for the service that is very responsive. And for like VR, we all know about the inertia effects, if there's too much delay and things like that. So there is kind of a new frontier that is forming there. Now, I think I've used the slide 2 years ago, and I wanted to come back with it because I still have kind of this whole reservation about running 8 gigabit services out of PON, out of an XGS pipe that basically has 8.5 gig. And so this is not really very exciting engineering, or you have to do a lot of engineering to make sure that nothing bad happens. And so, if you do a 5 gig speed test, and between the orange and blue curve, whatever the aggregate bandwidth on the PON could be, as we look at it, it's like average bandwidth, we do a PON PM, we are like, yeah, okay, so we are good. We have run rate into the mid 20s, 30s, so that the guy could still do a speed test. But if you do this with 8 gig, you'll find yourself soon in trouble. So XGS may not be the best vehicle, and we've got people that have backed off and they did a 6 gig service or a 7 gig service because it just doesn't engineer that good. The other problem is that we don't really have, everybody talks about 10 gig PON, and it's really not 10 gig PON, it's like 8-ish gigish PON. So that's what it is. And I think, we'll see, in the standardization forum, people basically want to raise line rates now so that the marketing guys can go out and say, yeah, 100 gig PON is 100 gig, because we have more line rate to account for fact. Nevertheless, what we see is if we want these high peak rate services, the lifetime will be largely extended if you, for example, use something like 25 gig. And in a similar fashion, you would see the same effect on 50 gig. And the beauty of this is, you can now see products basically that are ready for, volume mass market adoption to do things like that, to deliver a true 10 gig Ethernet uni and have a good bit of run rate in terms of longevity of your network. But there's a bit of a problem, because we looked on this slide here, we looked at it and said, yeah, so everything is kind of static, right? But it really isn't, because what we saw in the other diagram where we see that we have like peak rate driven services, this is kind of like how this really looks on a short interval level. Because we have kind of like, everybody felt like, let's look at PON PM. PON PM looks good because we only have like 17.5% usage. We don't have a problem. That's not necessarily true, because we have peaking going on, and this peaking overlaying with other things like a speed test. So now we kind of have things where we want to have all this stuff for the speed test, the killer app that every operator likes, and then we have kind of this peaking into it. And it will impact A, how our speed tests work, and then B, how that interacts with the experience for the service that actually uses these downstream or upstream peaks. So we're starting on the Nokia side to look at this from a little bit a different angle, because we want to understand what does that actually do to us. So we had a couple of Bell Labs people that started looking, if we look into, a 5-minute interval and we see certain trends, what can we derive? Are there mathematical ways, for example, to control the behavior of your OLT, to control the subscriber traffic in a better way? And the Bell Labs guys were able to show that kind of using these techniques to predict basically where these peaks happen, that we could actually do something more intelligent that provides better quality of experience with these type of algorithms. So we are doing research in this area, and that all goes in the direction of AI and ML, right? So we are starting to deliver on a whole set of new functions, things that we wouldn't have been able to do like 5 or 6 years ago, because we didn't have the right software platforms underneath. So we do way more data parsing. We are generating digital twins to kind of predict outcomes, or to do reasonable network management, to basically shift weights between users so that a more smooth experience can be provided. So it's not all about just the headline speeds, but what are you doing underneath? And it's not about 15-minute intervals. It's like, what are you going to do on the sub 15-second or 5-second level, and what happens there, and what effects does that, and how does it affect the services? And there's good stuff that's basically coming out in the management platforms because we're trying to get things off the hands of the operator, fat fingering things that are, you know, incorrect and actually damage something in the network. Machines don't do that. Machines don't mistype if you properly model it. So there's a lot of change in the way what the operator of the network now sees. Sure, we have all this raw bandwidth capability, but we're starting to do way more intelligent things in our OLTs and ONTs with it. And that, at the end of the day, the state of the art for these networks is shifting. Art is evolving, right? New art forms are coming up, and one of the goals is very clear, that people are trying to figure out what in these networks that we're building, in these broadband networks, can we actually automate, to the point of saying the holy grail would be autonomous operation with minimal human intervention. And once you build a proper digital twin and you describe what you want the thing to do, the machine actually could do a lot of functions, and the network operator actually becomes more a supervisor that basically says, let me change the boundaries of my business logic. So we will see from where we are currently, where we have simple closed loop operation, we will see over the next years, you know, a continuous evolution towards more autonomous operation in networks. So these were a couple of things, and now I wanted to come back to the PON standard, because I'm pretty sure it will be a pretty heavy section on PON standard evolution, and I called it the marketing state of the art and real world volume deployment. When I look at the North American market, this is kind of a view how the technologies evolve. I hope you guys can see this. The big yellow cat here, XGS, is really taking the lion's share. This is essentially the replacement for GPON as a general purpose technology. We are seeing ramps in other technologies. Certain standards have fallen by the wayside and are very isolated, like NG-PON2. 25 gig is starting to appear and starting to grow. We are seeing 50 gig. Now, there are regional differences between, for example, what happens in North America. In other parts of the world, you know, 50 gig may have a different role. And we're seeing in the cable companies still, you know, a good bit of uptake for 10 gig. That's basically kind of the way it presents itself, and GPON is phasing out in North America awfully fast. So really, there's not a lot of OLT investment anymore. Most of it is just to hang GPON ONTs if people haven't upgraded to XGS. In the North American view, so outside of China, the projections that are stole from Omdia here are pretty clear that the market window is wide open for 25 gig. Of course, I'm not going to do any shameless self-promotion, but you know, if I did, then I'd say come to our booth and see a bunch of 25 gig stuff. But we're not talking about
No.
We're just talking about 25 gig line rate. That's all we're talking about. And so, but that doesn't mean that we need to abandon 50 gig over 25 gig. It's important that you are playing in multiple technologies and provide a meaningful upgrade path for people. But if we believe the average selling price type of information that the analysts are kind of collecting worldwide, between the blue line, which is basically GPON, slightly above XGS, 25 gig and 50 gig, there's a high dynamic in terms of what it actually costs to deliver a service. And to make it worth your while relative to the cost of a truck roll, you know, how expensive will your ONTs become? Or how much less expensive will they become? Volume will do a lot to this, but you know, this is not something that 50 gig will not be effective tomorrow in terms of what we could do with 25 gig over 10. Right? So We believe that there's a good opportunity for 25 gig, and it allows us, we're kind of like looking at this, GPON is fading out. Yes, there's customers that have legacy GPON, but if you start with XGS, which there are many these days, you now get back in this 3 lambda thing. That's why I basically have these 2 linears here for 3 lambdas on my name tag. So we can now combine XGS 25 and 50 gig PON, for example, or we could do GPON XGS and 25, or we could do GPON XGS and 50 gig PON. So there will be a lot of possibilities the way we deploy systems, depending on where the starting point is for the operator and what might be the next logical step for these people to do. So we actually believe that 25 gig, since it is essentially just kind of like a little bit turning the dial on 10 gig technology solution, it provides good cost points and incremental investment. We were very surprised about the uptake because first we thought this is really something for business, and we are seeing that people lead with this as a high-speed, bleeding-edge residential service differentiator in the market. And so that allows us to see pretty competitive offers with that 25 gig technology. And, you know, we can have this coexist with 50 gig or 100 gig, whatever comes down the pipe, since there are defined wavelength bands. With that, I'd like to summarize. If you start from 10 gig, you have options. You can wait for 50 gig. If there are any cases that you need to do it in the short term, 25 gig is available, and then there is yet another path where people could go to a future technology, even faster than 50 gig, whatever will come out of the ITU standards. The path is open, and the technology choice is yours, what you're going to put into your network. With that, I'd like to thank you.
Thanks, Andreas.